So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, and thank you for continuing to join us for the rest of the day. As we proceed back to the conference co-hosted by the Center of New American Security, the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, and the Prospect Foundation. The first panel is our parliamentary panel, where we're going to talk about the envisage of a free and open Indo-Pacific region. It is an honor that we have our moderator, Dr. Chen Tongshan, who is a former legislator himself and the chairman of the Prospect Foundation. And now, without further ado, Dr. Chen, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Again, good morning to everyone. I'm very honored to be given this kind of opportunity to be able to chair this particular session. The title is Envisage a Free and Open Indo-Pacific Region. Today we have many real distinguished participants. Most of them they congressmen, congresswomen, and holding a very important position in their respective countries. So without further ado, I think I want to save time and let me say briefly, I think to my extreme right is Congressman Jiang Qi-zhen from Taiwan. I have known him for so many years, a very excellent, brilliant congressman from Taiwan, so we are very happy to have him. And then we have a congresswoman from Japan. I think I have known her for also quite some time. Honorable, no, I'm sorry, I mean the Matsukawa-san. I'm sorry. I just returned from a long trip last night, so I'm still sleeping. So forgive me. So Matsukawa-san, we welcome you to Taiwan. So appreciate your participation. And then to my left, oh no, I'm sorry. We have a Congresswoman, Eddie Bernice Johnson from United States. And which state are you from, by the way?
Dallas, Texas.
Texas? Oh, okay. I've been to Texas quite a few times when I was attending Oklahoma University. So welcome. Yeah. And then to my left, oh, I have good old friends. Congressman Suzuki. Yeah. He participated, I think, many times in our discussions over the years, and we certainly are a very good friend of Taiwan, and he's very knowledgeable about everything. So, then again, thank you very much for coming. And then we have, again, my good old friends also coming from our congressman, and we've been working together for many times, and his name is Luo Zhi-Zeng. So I think I have finished, I think briefly introducing all my friends, and so I think we are giving 85 minutes discussions on these topics. So I hope, I think each participant maybe most maybe 12 minutes, and then after finishing, maybe we'll allow sometimes for us to have some questions asked. So may we start from maybe from the extreme right? Is that okay? Yeah. Oh, you want? Okay. Yeah, you make it first because you are from Taiwan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Chen, all the distinguished guests, and our presenter and discussant, and all the VIP from different countries, and all the parliamentarians from different countries. Good morning. Actually, this is my, I guess, first time to join the dialogue among the United States, Japan, and Taiwan security dialogue. Of course, I think that the dialogue is very important, and every year we have different topics. And it seems to me the strategic environment is also changing. So we have to focus on different topics. However, how to really enhance the security environment in the region, go through some more concrete approach or policy measures. I think that would be more important than just talk or than just dialogues. And as a parliamentarian in Taiwan's legislative yuan, I think our point of view is not just represent myself, it's also represent the people in our country or in our constituency. So I think the dialogue between or among the different countries' parliamentarians is very important. And the result could be used to become the input to the policy decision-making process. And regarding the topic of this section is to how to reach a so-called free and open Indo-Pacific region. But first of all, I think I have to ask several questions when we start to talk about this question or this topic. Number one, what is the free and open? How could you define the free and open? That is, what is the purpose of the free and open Indo-Pacific regions? What is the main topic, main goal we try to reach? We have to ask this question first. Otherwise, I really don't know the countries or partners in this region, what can they do? So I think the first question is the definition of free and open. Is this going to be economy free and open, or is going to become or to pursue politically free and open? Or is going to involve any military cooperation, military alliance? I think we have to clarify this question or these questions first. Otherwise, it's very difficult to focus or to let all the country in this region to have the so-called consensus and to have the like-minded policies to work together. And secondly, I think if we cannot clarify the goal or the target of this so-called Indo-Pacific strategy or Indo-Pacific free and open region, that will make the country here confused. Is there we are in the same line or not? And who should be included in this so-called Indo-Pacific strategy or strategic alliance, and who should not be included? So I think we have to answer this question first. That's why I always emphasize we have to clarify what is the goal, what is the main purpose. For example, if the priority is economy or free trade, open trade, or rule-based free trade, I think free trade agreements like TPP should be established as soon as possible. But right now it seems to be TPP is not working right now, and it has become the so-called CTTPP, led by Japan instead of the United States before. And if it's going to be, if this Indo-Pacific region is going to become a so-called value alliance or like-minded alliance in terms of value sharing, then what kind of value should we emphasize? Are we going to emphasize the democracy, free human rights, and make that as the main priorities for the alliance. I think this also should be discussed and should be clarified. However, so far, I think we have not seen any clear target or clear missions for this so-called free and open Indo-Pacific regions. Even though if we look at the U.S. strategy or U.S. foreign policy in past 2 years during the Trump administration, what we're seeing right now is a bilateral approach more than the multilateral approach. And if we want to form the so-called region, free and open region, it should be conducted by multilateral approach instead of bilateral approach. So that's why I'm wondering whether United States is serious about the so-called Indo-Pacific region. If the United States is really serious about this region, or this strategy, or this strategic alliance, we should be able to see some multilateral approach or policy measure being conducted in the past 2 years. But in the past 2 years so far, we have seen many bilateral relationships that has been conducted or been focused by the United States, such as U.S.-China bilateral, U.S.-North Korea bilateral, U.S.-Japan bilateral, U.S.-South Korea bilateral, and U.S.-Philippines bilateral. But so far, we didn't see any concrete multilateral policy measures or policy initiatives in this region. That's why I'm kind of wondering, is the so-called free and open Indo-Pacific region, is that real, or is that just a campaign slogan, or is just a slogan for the Trump administration to some extent maintain the dialogues with East Asia partners and say, hey, I'm still in, we United States still focusing on the Asia, or we still emphasize the importance of the Asias. I mean, if we don't try to clarify the target, the mission, the main purpose of this alliance of free and open region, in the end, I am so afraid that the initiative will become something like talk shop, something like chat room, or something like just diplomatic social occasion, and without any concrete results. And so far, after Trump administration, it's already been 2 years. And that's why I'm kind of wondering. Because if we compare to the Obama's administration, Obama's administration strategy is so-called rebalance Asia, reimbalance, or rebalance Asia, or back to Asia strategy. And during Obama's administration, we have been, seeing some approach that the Obama administration has adopted, such as the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's been initiated by the Obama administration. And they really make the TPP into concrete actions, such as negotiations being conducted several years and already reached some results. And others, such as the Obama administration, also tried to kind of improve their relationship with the East Asia region, especially the South Asia countries, ASEANs. So we have been seeing the so-called ASEAN-United States cooperation. A lot of initiatives have been conducted in that period. So the other question is that, what is the Indo-Pacific relationship with the Obama's previous policy measures? Is that continuity, or is this totally different foreign policy from the United States? That's, I think, the other question I have to ask. But no matter why, from the Taiwan's perspectives, I think we have more concerns about what kind of role Taiwan should play and what kind of role Taiwan can contribute to these regions. And what we want is very concrete results. And what we want is a real participations in these initiatives. I think we hope that we are more like a shareholder rather than a bargaining chip on the table. So that role should Taiwan play, or what kind of role we can play, that also related to what is the mission of the alliance, or what is the main purpose for this Indo-Pacific free and open regions. I think that's the, I try to ask him myself, and I also try to ask him, our friends here, if we can, in this forum, to make the question be answered, or make the purpose more clarified. That would be better for not just Taiwan, but also our partners in this region to reach some consensus, and we can do something real, do something concrete, instead of just talk. So I think that's majorly my point here so far, and hope can be shared or can be discussed later. I think I end up here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman Jiang Qi. I think because of the time limit, I don't want to repeat some of the content, some of the topics I think he already mentioned about them. I think I would leave the questions to the audience, I think, after each one of the panel finished their own discussions. So let's move forward to the next, I think, speaker, our good friend from Japan, Louis Matsukawa-san. Thank you, please. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Wochao Sonchuan Louis. Okay, well, let me just call Louis is fine for your moderator. Thank you very much, first of all, for very kind hospitality of your organization. And this is my second time to participate in this forum. And I'm really happy to be invited again, sitting in front of you again. And especially on this time topic, India-Pacific strategy dialogue. And now this year we have the Indian participants as well, I understand. So this forum, Trilateral Forum, is actually trying to enlarge and put in the contents more contents into the dialogue itself, I understand. And also, well, I think the Honorable Chi Chen, am I pronouncing your name correct? Put very correct questions. This India-Pacific strategy actually started from Prime Minister Abe when he proposed this strategy at the TICAD 2012. But even before that, he had this idea of, in 2007, when Prime Minister Abe visited India, it was Prime Minister Modi's time. Shin's time. 2007, well, he proposed this idea of linking Indian Ocean to Pacific to maritime countries needs to cooperate each other. And then even back then, before Prime Minister Aso's time, so it's much more earlier, Japan had this idea of arc of freedom and prosperity. So at that time, the idea was to let's connect the nations which shares values like democracies, rule of law, or human rights. What I want to emphasize here is, I think these strategies, ideas, whatever you call, is a response to rising China. China last year made a proposal, Mr. Xi Jinping made a very clear declaration in his Communist Party that, China is assuming to be our superpower in 2049, and by doing so, they want to modernize their military capability by 2035. So basically, if I make it very short, it's a concept of China 2049, and it doesn't say in that way, but I'm sure the United States understands the intention and Chinese projection direction very clearly. That's why I think the US made a report last year, National Security Strategy, which defines China and Russia as a revisionist power, and basically saying that US will compete with these two countries in technology to military capability to economy, and US try to stay in power. That's what I read. And what I want to say is this India-Pacific strategy, India-Pacific strategy, I'm really happy that US takes its own as our own strategy. Now the Pacific Commander, before, the name has been changed to India-Pacific Commander. So it's very clear. And it's really important because this strategy is is to, one, try to influence, change Chinese behavior more favorable to the international existing order. Secondly, I think by networking through this strategy among nations, we want to protect ourselves. This is our security. This is our security policy. I think this is a very too clear aim. And this time, India-Pacific strategy is not emphasizing democracies. It's more or less about geopolitical, thinking. It's 3 points. One is about the freedom of navigation, number one. Number two is rule of law. Number three is connecting infrastructures. And you're perfectly right. We have to put contents in it, because even if you're just talking about the strategies thing, but don't see any concrete actions, then there is no content, there is no substance. And unless we have substance, we cannot influence Chinese behavior, or not even to less protect ourselves. And I think especially the Chinese idea of one belt, one road itself is a good idea. You want to have our economic relations with the all Eurasian countries, and some part I think I appreciate it even. But if you look at the maritime part, it's more worrisome. As Admiral pointed out, we see many unilateral militarization in South China Sea, and we see more influences in Pacific Islands, where before the war, Japan had this great prosperity sphere in Pacific, and we lost the war, and the vacancy was filled by the US. Now it's Chinese influence is much more visible in these Pacific Islands too. So, and if it is a benign one, beneficial to each country, that's fine. But it's not the case, unfortunately. Many countries actually thought that this is a wonderful offer from China, receives big grants, has to give up their ports, ending up 100 years lease, for example. This is just one example. And geography doesn't change. Japan sitting next to China. Japan does care good relation with China. We want to improve the relation with China. But if you look at the security, we have the trouble in the sea with China. I think it's truth. And we are not, Japan does have no idea of compromising our sovereignty or the security issues. So we have to manage the relation. Japan has to manage the relation with China with diplomatic skills. At the same time, we have to be very clear about these, what we cannot compromise. And I think it's the same. Taiwan and Japan share a similar strategic interest in the sea. Taiwan and Japan locates on the first island chain, and de facto independent existence. I don't want to be very, very clear. Politically, our policy is very consistent. We support one China policy. So I'm talking about de facto independent existence of Taiwan is security benefit of Japan. And we understand that. It is Chinese people, Taiwan people's choice for the future. We're not saying about that. But current situations, if you look at, I think it's really important for the US, Japan, Taiwan, or Australia, India, all countries which locates the sea lane coming up to the Indian Ocean to the African islands, needs to cooperate together to make sure the freedom of navigation and rule of law and our security, our lands will not be influenced in bad way. So that is the role of this India-Pacific strategy. And I would like to say, we don't need to put formality so much into it. I know Taiwan has limitations, right? And Japan has some limitations. We have the very special constitution. And US is the biggest, I think, the supporter of this. Unless we have US, this strategy is meaningless. So US is most important. And I'm really appreciating that US has put one, if I'm not correct, please check, I don't remember, but I think it was $12.5 billion US dollars for the funds for India-Pacific strategy. And also US recently increased the defense budget, which is also very good. And I think the relevant countries needs to work together to not making a formal meeting of this and that, but rather, for example, information sharing, or even the companies or private companies of, let's say, India, Australia, and Japan working together to make a co-investment in certain countries, for example, and then governments can support to make such deal easier. I think many ways the countries who supports this strategy can work together, and not only just government level, but private, or the conferences like this. So I think and then the other thing is, it's really important to keep moving on. This is the ongoing ideas. So it is very important to keep going, rather than focusing on just saying that we have contents or not. I think I want to point that out. And yep, I stop here. And yeah, lastly, the current US-China trade war is not just our economic competition. It's a struggle over hegemony. So I don't think it ends so easily, even though we see some deal. As long as the essence is the hegemonic competition, we have to really see that the countries has to watch over these, where it ends or where it goes, because geography doesn't change. And I stop here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman Suzuki. Sorry, Masukawa Sensei. Thank you. I think, as we understand, this particular session has been designed, designated for 3 countries, representative to talk about the issue. So we have from Taiwan, from Japan, and from USA. And I think, like I want to repeat it again because of the time limit, I wanted to move on and so on now. Somebody talking about the Obama's administration, about the everything going on during Obama's administration. Now, fortunately, today we have Congresswoman from United States. Maybe you can explain something about it. So again, please, Congresswoman. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and let me thank you, Mr. President of the Foundation, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, as well as the Admiral formerly with NATO. I want to be sure to compliment the leadership for bringing us together, and certainly I think the roadmap has been put very plainly before us by the Admiral. Our challenge, of course, is to see what we do to meet that roadmap. For 20 years, I worked with a bilateral with congressionals from Japan and the United States, and then it was joined by South Korea and lasted until the funds ran out. But I really think that the dialogue, the staying in touch, educating each other on the uniqueness of all of our beings is really a very big step in the right direction. It is clear that we are interdependent and cannot do very well isolating ourselves from the rest of the world. And to do that, we must let the world know that we are in touch with each other. I think that we look at bullying, we look at threatening, we look at a number of techniques that are used by certain leaders in certain countries to frighten you. But if you have a good foundation of being together, then you have a pretty good wall of defense in terms of taking on the rest of us. It's very difficult for any policy to be roughshod over a nation or a group when they're looking at togetherness for the rest of the world. If we all separate, all standing alone, it will be easier for them to be successful. But I think dialogues like today and continue to understand and developing more and more interdependence is really going to be our defense and security for throughout the world, because we are more assertive now. We have more communications because of the technologies. We've been brought together a great deal more. We must take advantage of those type of discoveries and opportunities to make for a better communication line throughout our countries, throughout the world. I'd heard of Taiwan, but I didn't come to Taiwan until 1993. I was fully grown. And the reason I had heard about Taiwan then, being a native of Waco, Texas, is because of the diversity in the area where I had chosen to be my home, Dallas, Texas. Because of that diversity, I got to know so many of our leaders who were originally from Taiwan, and they still love and come to Taiwan very frequently. It had kept me interested as well, and I think that that is not an unusual type of reaction. I am from one of the most diverse countries in the world, and diversity has added to the knowledge for the rest of the world. And so I think it's very important that we keep in mind that education and communication leads to more understanding. We are more interdependent than we think sometimes, or even than we know. But as we dialogue more and more, we understand the importance of relationships. That's why we have a NATO. That's why we have a UN. And I think all of us can appreciate those institutions. We might need to have a delegation of lawmakers with the same type of input, because every nation has to depend on their legislative bodies to pass legislation, and that includes international relationships. I don't believe for a minute that we're becoming more secure in the world, I think we are facing times when we can be even more insecure until we keep in touch with each other. Primarily because technologies have brought us together. You know, years ago I read as a little girl that Columbus discovered America. I was fully grown when I realized that Columbus really didn't discover America, but he discovered that there was a country that not invaded by anybody else but Native Americans, and everybody else became an immigrant. I am from a nation that is a nation of immigrants. After the word got out that that was probably a good place to go. And that's made my nation the best and strongest democracy in the world because of that diversity. We can continue that with respect, equal respect for each other, and staying in touch and educating ourselves, developing fair policies that we need to protect our businesses and our interests. None of that to me is impossible. I'm an old person, I've been through a lot. But I do think that we are closer than ever before in many ways, and we have to tackle our future together. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Congresswoman from the USA. And I think I heard you talking about we can not only just keep going on, we have to have the communication. I think that's very important, and I agree with you on that. So because of the time, again, I think I have under pressure. I have to keep moving, keep going on. So should I ask now Congressman from Japan, and he's been attending this kind of conference so many, many times. So we appreciate it. Every time we need somebody to come over from Japan, he's always here. So my good friend, Congressman Suzuki, please. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chair, and good morning for this all the audience. Actually, as our chairman said, I attended this forum many, many times, and at the same time, in these 2 years, this is my 8th visit to Taiwan. So I think and I believe that I'm one of the best friend of Taiwan in Japanese Parliament. Actually, last week, by last Friday, I was in Taiwan and see President and Premier, many principal members of this country. And yesterday, just before leaving Japan, I met our Prime Minister and talk about our Taiwan issue. Of course, I cannot mention about the detail, but at least this is my perception, is that Prime Minister Abe really highly evaluate the existence of the free and democratic Taiwan in this region. And I think that current administration is historically the most pro-Taiwan administration of Japan. And well, about today's theme, this promoting free and open Indo-Pacific Ocean, Pacific region. This is really appropriate theme in this timing, I think. Free and open Indo-Pacific region. I think the concept should be the openness and free trade in this region. And I think that no one do have the question for this theme or concept several years ago. But vis-a-vis several years ago, I think two big shifts has happened in this region. One is the change of the administration of United States. Of course, I don't think United States has changed its concept, but at least in this region, there certainly be the concern about the US commitment to this region. How long and how strong would United States have the commitment in this region? Region means whole the Asia. Whenever I talk with the head of the countries or the principal member of the countries in this region, most of them feel such kind of the big concern. And because current situation is that most of the Asian countries do facing the severe pressure, both economic and military pressure from mainland China. And most of the country had been balancing the US-Japan camp and China camp. And the fact that many countries feel a kind of the concern on the US commitment in this region. If they cannot believe in the strong commitment of the United States in this region, they inevitably have to step closer to China. And that really harm the balancing situation of this region. And I think that this timing is really critical in that context. And the second shift is, of course, the change of the behavior of PLC, mainland China, especially since the last autumn 19th Communist Party Conference of mainland China. We've seen clear shift of the attitude or behavior of the Xi Jinping administration, we think. They clearly heighten the level of the aggressiveness of the military behavior in this region. There had been a kind of the big question is that of course the best scenario of China is they became the responsible stakeholder in this region. But frankly speaking, it is not likely. And we do facing the two risks, we think. The one risk is too strong China, and the other risk is too weak China. And let me say that about the weak China part, if we analyze carefully about the Chinese current economic situation or demographic situation, there is some kind of seeds of the weakening China. But at the same time, if we see the Chinese military behavior, there's some seeds of the too strong China. Especially their behavior in East China Sea, South China Sea, or Taiwan Strait. Really the big concern we can see in this region. And how to offset such kind of our Chinese really aggressive behavior? I think that, as I mentioned, US-Japan's strong commitment in this region, and in addition, the common platform like TPP, that is really, really important, I think. And let me explain about what is the real intention of Chinese current behavior. We are analyzing that Chinese real intention is how to have the dominant influence in this region. And in that purpose, China, in long run, they want to see the declining influence of United States in Asia and west half of Pacific Ocean, militarily and economically. And in military context, their strategy is basically to have the free access of their submarine to Pacific Ocean. And their submarine base is placed in Hainan Island, and in that context, Vasi Strait and Miyako Strait is two-way exit to the Pacific Ocean. And in that context, they heighten the pressure for the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait and East China Sea. So I do think that United States, Japan, Taiwan should heighten its level of the close communication, and we should work together. And at the same time, we need to build the common platform. As I mentioned, the TPP or CPTPP should be that our solution, I think. And basically, the many the strategic partners in this region, like Australia, Vietnam, Taiwan, and also South Korea, they really have the strong interest to participation for the TPP. And what's interesting is that the country like United Kingdom, of course, they don't belong to this region, but still have some sort of influence in this region. Those countries do have the interest in participation for the TPP. And I think that to build such kind of the platform with broad partner is really likely. So I think that to promoting a free and open Pacific Indo region in that context is really the likely scenario. And I think that Taiwan, Japan, US again should work together in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So far, I think in terms of time, I think it's going pretty well. It's under control, so I'm happy about it. Thanks for your cooperation. I just mentioned about the reason why we have picked 3 countries' representatives to come in over here to give the good starting discussion here is because I think we understand the Congressman's opinion reflect the idea or the opinions of the people back home. So I think that would in turn reflect the government policy regarding to this very important topics over here this morning we are discussing. So just keep moving on. The last one, but not the least, I think we have the local Taiwanese congressman, again, my good friend, Mr. Do Tzu-Tseng. He has been active in politics for a long time, just like Jiang Qi-Chun. So we admire them very much. And so please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me start by thanking the organizer, the Prosperity Foundation, for having me again at this very important security dialogue. And it's always an honor and privilege for me to join this very distinguished and panelists and these very important VIPs from different backgrounds. The topic is very big. Think about a free and open Indo-Pacific region. But for me to understand the international relations and security situation in the region, I personally think that it can be analyzed from 3 different perspectives or different aspects. The 3 aspects are political, economic, and military. And these 3 aspects are interrelated and affect each other. So let me take a moment to explain a little bit my own views about these very important interrelated dimensions. First, let me start by talking about the military dimension of international relations in the region. As mentioned by Admiral this morning, the competition in this Indo-Pacific region is some sort of a race, competition or confrontation between the maritime powers and continental powers. So in other words, sea power versus land power. And the history has shown us, and the textbooks have taught us, that the race or competition between the continental and maritime powers usually end up with sort of war, conflicts, and so on. And of course, there have been many discussions about these possibilities, but hopefully we can manage the relationship between a rising continental power and the maritime power in a more peaceful way. But the problem is that the continental power is hoping to become a maritime power. So the competition will be more visible in the coming future. So how can we do that? We are learning how to manage a rising continental power hoping to become a maritime power. And of course, Xi Jinping has said that the Pacific is huge, that it can accommodate 2 great powers of the US and China. And that might be true, and that may not be true. Because obviously we have a rising maritime power, but we also have an existing maritime power. Can these 2 great powers can really coexist in this Indo-Pacific region? Let's wait and see. But that's the first challenge we are going to face. Secondly, the interaction between countries in the region is essentially the relationship between authoritarian states and democracies. That's one important aspect we should not ignore. It's not two democracies, one rising continental power, the other maritime power. It's a rising authoritarian continental power versus existing maritime democratic power. So the nature of relationship is somewhat, cannot be confined to only military aspects. The democracies versus non-democracies is also a very important dimension we need to observe. I don't see any sign of leaders in Beijing or in Vietnam or North Korea thinking about moving their countries into a democracy. As a matter of fact, they are hoping to be in power for good. And the recent decision by Xi Jinping and the top leaders to extend the tenure is just a very good case in point and vivid evidence of what happens in the minds of the leaders in Beijing. And third dimension or third aspects of the international relations in the region is that the exchanges between countries in the Indo-Pacific region are essentially the competition or cooperation between the free market economies and not so free or state-dominated economies. Of course, China has become a more free market-oriented country, but in essence, I always believe that China is not a free market economy. Okay? So that's something that we should not ignore. We are not dealing with a free market economy, we are dealing with a state-dominated or even state-controlled economy. The state can twist, can manipulate the market in some way. So only if we can understand the nature of this kind of relationship can we have better understanding how to deal with the rising continental, non-democratic China. So obviously we have two groups or two blocks of countries. On the one hand, on one side you have, countries are rising, hoping to become a maritime power, not so free economy, non-democratic countries. But on the other hand, on the other side, you have free, maritime, market-oriented, and democratic countries. So the very important question we had to ask ourselves is that, can these two blocks of countries get along? And I'm not suggesting that we are coming back to the, Cold War period. I'm not suggesting that. But the very nature of this kind of relationship is there. And that's something we should not ignore. So the question we have to ask ourselves is that, is the current coexistence or rapprochement between the two blocks of countries, can it last forever? Or is the so-called status quo sustainable? And I'm somewhat concerned about the future prospect of this kind of current so-called status quo. In other words, the status quo is dynamic. It's not static. And the traditional school of thought suggests that by engaging China, we are hopeful we can transform China. We can lead China in the right direction, with the hope that China will eventually become a free, democratic market economy. Yes, something is happening. Yes, China is moving towards a free market economy, more openness, blah, 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 and so on. But we often forget the other direction of influence. In other words, by bringing China to the world community, China is also influencing the rest of the world. In other words, influencing us, as democracies, free market economy. And fortunately, we are seeing the more awareness of this direction of influence. The recent publication by the Hudson Institute about the CCP's influence in other democracies is a very important report we have to read. And the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission by the Congress also published a report about the title of the book is China's Overseas United Front Work. How China influenced other countries' electoral politics, civil societies, and so on. That's a very timely, important report by the US Congress. Another book I want to mention to you is a book by an Australian scholar, Cliff Hamilton. The title of the book is Silent Invasion and the Rising Chinese Influence in Australia. The book details China's increasing influence in Australia, and it details China's systematic attempt to expand its espionage network and influence in Australia. And the conclusion of the book is that this has caused the erosion of Australia's sovereignty. So this is a very important book that, I just finished it last week. It's a new book by Professor Hamilton. And there are numerous examples. And after reading the book, my feeling is that, well, these are not new things. These things have already happened in Taiwan in many aspects. For instance, as you know that airline companies provide newspapers to passengers. But our local airline companies, they impose some sort of self-censorship. They don't provide certain newspapers to passengers on their way to China because that may antagonize Chinese authorities. And let me give you a personal story, very heartbroken sad stories about my experiences. I have a very good friend. He has a huge investment in China. And I have been a good friend of his family for years, for decades. And a couple of months ago, his father passed away. And I want to pay a tribute, and I want to go to his father's funeral. But because we are so good friends, he told me, frankly, he hoped me not to go to his father's funeral. And I say, why? Say, I was negotiating an investment project in China. I'm afraid if you go to my father's funeral in Taiwan, and that will make him trouble because you are a green politician, DPP politician. I'm not sure whether there are spies or whoever in Taiwan reporting his friends, his relationship with the DPP camp or the Green camp in Taiwan, but he, in some way, imposed some sort of self-censorship. So by engaging China, yes, we are hoping we can change China, but the other way around is that China also challenge our ways of life. And that is also happening in the academic community as well. If you are scholars or China experts, if you are too critical of China, not only in Taiwan, if you are in the States, in Europe, you are too critical of China, you may not get a visa to go to China. You have no access to China experts or Chinese officials. So they use this to influence the public opinions or academic views about China, blah, 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 and so on. And the establishment of Confucius Institutes in other countries is also another approach to influence the civil society and the views and perceptions of China in the minds of other countries, peoples. So the concern I have now is that we need to cooperate, especially countries of like-minded countries and countries of shared values of the free market economy, democracies, human rights, and so on. We need to cooperate in response to these kind of challenges. Not just a free and open Indo-Pacific region, free market democratic region. And China is using a very effective strategy, divide and defeat. Divide and conquer. Divide your society, divide the allies, and so on. So we need to cooperate. We need to coordinate our efforts in response to the rising China influence. I always argue that if China is stronger, okay, because China could be stupid and make wrong mistakes, wrong decisions. But if China is becoming stronger and smarter, and that's the concern we need to have. So finally, let me start by, quoting a very important, saying, for countries of like-minded, shared values, united we stand, divided we fail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we concluded from our distinguished panel's discussions. Now I think we are ready to open to floors for anyone of you might have some questions to ask. But before that, let me say the Indo-Pacific region's issues is becoming issues are very important. I can just give you one example. I just returned from Hanoi, Vietnam, participating in same topics. I think the topic was also Indo-Pacific Conference, and that was sponsored by the India Foundation. And in that, many participants, I think big crowds, focus on the issues of, again, same thing here. And it happens to be, I think we are discussing the same issue here this morning. But we have about 15 minutes, I think, available. So I hope, I think maybe any one of you may have questions, and our discussants may be able to respond to your question. So please, any questions? Okay, please, yeah, I see there.
Hello, good morning. My name is Zheng Xiani. I'm a visiting scholar from Spain within the Taiwan Fellowship program by Taiwan MOFA. Well, I'm from Spain. I don't know if you, because here in the media in Taiwan, this past 2 days has been talk a lot about a university back in Spain that they receive email from China embassy threatening the university. That was my university, actually. And this is a question for legislator law, because I found your words very encouraging, especially the part you say that how Western institutions, Western educational and academic institutions are feeling China's pressure. Well, I can. I've been witness firsthand about this pressure. And I would like to ask you, because it's clear that we have to push back. It's clear that we have to make this known. That was the reason I went public on this email from China's embassy, because we have to document these coercions and these threats against our academic institutions. So I would like to ask you, what would you recommend for like SOP, if you may, for academic institutions to be able to respond to when they have these situations? Because back at our university, when we received this threatening email from the China's embassy, we were pretty shocked. We were paralyzed. I remember when in the meeting room with the dean and the dean office team, and we didn't know how to respond. The president of the university didn't know how to respond. He had to consult with Madrid. I don't know which. I guess with the Ministry of Education. I'm not sure. And there was some dialogue going in between the Ministry of Education. Either they didn't know what to do. They have to contact the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And there was all this chain of command, and they were pretty lost as how to respond. And
excuse me, can you briefly?
Yes, sure. So
just concentrate on the question you have?
Yes. So, what would you suggest our universities when facing this situation to respond?
Okay, maybe maybe that's. I mean, we put all the questions together, and then we have asked our panelists to respond to your question. Okay, yeah, please, yeah.
Thank you very much, Darling Joanne Chen from Academic Sinica. I have a question for Congresswoman Johnson. You are sitting on two very important committees in the House. One is on science, technology, the other one, transportation and infrastructure. Two of the most important issues in this free and open Indo-Pacific region. One is infrastructure, how to help those countries need infrastructure, and also cooperation on science and technology, even space. So would you like to share some of your experience as a ranking member of the two committees, and maybe you can shed some light of future cooperation? Thank you.
Maybe we will respond later on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, please. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Tessie Lambon, I'm the ambassador of the Republic of Kiribati to Taiwan. Just on the, to Matsukawa-san, I think you mentioned our region in the Pacific and the challenges that we're facing. But first of all, I think the Indo-Pacific region includes our countries in the Pacific, and the issue or the question that was asked before on what does free and open means. So we understand what that means in terms of the U.S. policy on Indo-Pacific security strategy, and I think we all understand that, and we agree that we need to respect sovereign rights of the countries in the Indo-Pacific region to determine their own pathway to development and open lines of communications, the sea, the air. But for the Pacific, the most important thing for us is our ocean, is the Pacific Ocean. And our leaders are focused on developing the blue Pacific, or blue economy. And this is, for us, a security issue. We rely on the Pacific Ocean for our source of livelihood. So in the context of the Indo-Pacific security, how would you see, we know that the focus is on the security in the region here, but I think it's also important to not to forget the part of our Indo-Pacific region in the Pacific Ocean, and how we can also contribute to building the security for them. Blue economy, or blue Pacific. So just some
Okay, I think time is about up, and maybe we can start from Congressman Rhodes, and maybe you can respond to any questions regarding to the Yeah, no, please, yeah.
Oh, let me start with the question by the lady from Spain. I think what happened to your country, to your university happened to many universities. So it's not an isolated case. So as I suggest that if one university has to deal with the Chinese pressure alone, then there's no way they can resist the pressure. But if you all the universities to work together and say that that's not enough, we want to protect our freedom of academics, freedom and so on, then probably China will think about whether that's okay for them to push you around. And what happens to the recent case of airline companies being forced to change their names of Taiwan, from Taiwan to Taiwan Common China, Province of China, and so on. It's another good case in point. In other words, China has skillfully used their market to influence those airline companies, private companies, to make their reference to Taiwan in China's under China's demand. So that's the thing is happening, not just in one area, but also all areas. And that's one domino. If China can push the domino fall in one area, I'm afraid that they will keep pushing the envelope and pushing the domino. And in terms of inviting all Pacific countries in this kind of Indo-Pacific, that's a very important question, because I think Australia, Japan have also concerns about rising Chinese influence in the Pacific and South Pacific region. And so that's the area that we haven't talked too much about. And you're absolutely right. South Pacific Island countries cannot be left out of this Indo-Pacific strategy. Thank you.
I would like add one comment. Mr. Low's point is a really important point, I think. From now, China would intentionally use its big market as a leverage to make their political message to be accepted by those democratic countries. And as he said, the private sector is the weakest part of the chain. So not by its own firm or by its own country, all work together is really important. Otherwise, the position of each firms or each country would be weaker than the Chinese pressure. So in that context, that kind of how to deal with Chinese pressure together would be really important. And I would say that the original concept of G5 or G7 was how to resist for such kind of pressure from USSR. So we need to think together again about how to resist for the Chinese pressure together in G20 or the G7 meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Let me respond to the person who asked about the committees. Transportation and infrastructure in the U.S. has a jurisdiction over everything that moves, whether it was air, water, or land. And for 26 years, I have been on that committee, and we look at infrastructure around the nation with everybody on the committee, also looking out for what their own individual locations need. But that committee has also given me the opportunity to travel the world and see what's going on in all of those areas all over the world. What we've come to understand, of course, is there's a lack of adequate supply of drinking water around the world, so that's something that I deal with a lot. In Texas, we're building man-made lakes. Moving around has changed tremendously. We're now talking about autonomous vehicles and drones, so nothing ever remains static. We've come to accept that. Science, space, and technology is just that. It has a jurisdiction over NASA, over NOAA, which is our weather projections, National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, and so they can connect. For example, we can predict weather long before it happens now, which is an improvement from the past. And it has saved a lot of lives with notifying people, but it has not necessarily saved properties. So we're now looking at resilience, trying to determine what we can do to deal with the climate change that the whole world is experiencing and not doing a whole lot about. So it is the actual framework of the future, because in the science, space, and technology is an open door to basic research, and of course space exploration, which we cooperate with many nations around the world. I think they are two of the most important committees in the Congress, because both of them open doors for the future and also challenges us how we get through those doors.
Thank you. Then, Madam Matsukawa Sensei, please.
Thank you very much for the question, and also I'm inspired by the comments of the others and other questions too. And so before coming into the Pacific question, can I just mention that how I see I wanted to really add one thing regarding China, because now we see the power politics struggle in the political security spheres, but on the other hand, global economy is advanced, and let's say Shenzhen and Silicon Valley are friends. And the thing is, economically speaking, economy finds its way. I mean, it has its own logic and finds its way. And unfortunately, from the maybe security perspective, digital capitalism is really fitted for China. I mean, China's development is maybe not comparable to US if it is on the linear developments of the present technology. But if we think about the next innovation, if it's come from the big data, I mean, China, which has the largest population in the world, which doesn't have to care about individual privacy or the human rights. I mean, and then the decision can be made authoritarian way. It's really fitted. So I think ASEAN countries or Japan or Taiwan or even the US, the largest partner is China. I think he has to, have this certain skillful way of behavior that economically you don't want to lose the benefit from China, but you definitely don't want to compromise your security sovereignty interest. So that's a struggle we are facing. That's a dilemma. And I think the same goes for the Pacific Islands or any country, I would say. And so I think what we have to do is to have not only just security, but especially exactly as you pointed out, Ambassador, blue economy for Pacific. I mean, for Indian Pacific strategy nations, I mean, partners has to work together to find certain economically meaningful network. I see recently, for example, like Germany declined the one investment by a Chinese company because it's irrelevant, it violates their security interests. New Zealand has a new law to ban their purchase of the land, thinking about, foreign purchase. And I think there are many reactions that are happening. Not only that, I think our partners who share these maritime interests and values needs to work together to have better economic cooperation. That's really a key. So, and it's open. This strategy, Indo-Pacific strategy is open to any country, anybody, to China too. I'm really happy if China joins this strategy because that means China has changed. Although I have biggest doubts because influencing China, we've been tried, it's been failed. So I think it's a time for us to have a real strong network to make ourselves strong. Thank you.
Thank you, please.
Okay, I think I just add one more point. That is, well, when this forum we talking about the promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific region, I think all this regarding the one truth, that is the rise of China, and it's continuing, and it's going to change the status quo of the region, even the international order. So we also see the phenomena that is the rivalry between the US and China. And I think that's already, it's there. And the competition, confrontation, between the two hegemony, the United States and the China, I think it's ongoing. So how to deal with the two major powers in these changing global orders, and that will become the major problem and major question and puzzles for the world community, in particularly for East Asia countries to think about. But is this period of a power transition, would be conducted in what kind of ways? Is that going to be peaceful, or going to be confrontational, or going to be competition, or other style of power transition? I think that's the very important question, but not just for the world, but also for the Eastern country. But this also that some people thinking about or asking about the question whether Cold War style approach or competition is going back to Asia. And is that going to be true, or is that going to happen? I think that's a lot of people already asking this kind of question. But I would say any confrontational or zero-sum approach, I don't think that will help the region more safe and could cause some security damage to the region. So for the time being, I think the whole region or different country in the region should sit down and work together to looking for the new approach and to handle the new situation. That is regarding the rivalry between the United States and China, and that is regarding the new order in this region, and also regarding what kind of future would be in the East Asia or the Indo-Pacific region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we just conclude our discussions, and I'm so grateful to each one of our panelists. And so I hope this discussion will have some kind of positive impact regarding to the later maybe aspect regarding to how the so-called the Indo-Pacific region is going to affect the security and the safety of the whole world. So thank you very much for attending this kind of session, and I want to once again thank you very much for each of our panelists. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chairman Chen, and all our congresswomen and congressmen. We will go into a break and we'll reconvene at 11:25 as we rescheduled the stage. We'll reconvene at 11:25. Thank you.